It's not a religion. It's a relationship. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. The word religion has come to mean something negative for many Christians. And that's what I want to talk about today. My name is Joe Thorne. I'm the lead pastor of Redeemer Fellowship in St. Charles. And so, Redeemer, glad we have a chance to talk a little bit about a word that gets a lot of play among Christians, but oftentimes it is very negative. Christians are very quick to oftentimes say, I'm not religious. No, I'm not religious. Somebody accuses me of being religious, and it's usually a compliment. Oh, so you're like a real religious guy, right? The temptation might be to say, no, I'm not religious. I just really love Jesus. And we try to find ways to sort of almost apologize for our religiosity. And in part, it's because we misunderstand the word. Now, the word religion is a good word. It's not a bad word. In fact, the word religion today is commonly understood to be an organized set of attitudes and beliefs and practices that frame the worship of God or of a god or of gods. So it's a very generic definition. So that's not a bad thing. We don't have a problem with this, right? An organized set of attitudes, beliefs, and practices that frame how one worships their God. Religion. Not bad. So to be religious then, to be religious is to be devoted to your faith. It is to be consistent, disciplined, principled in your adherence to your religion. So this can apply to all kinds of people. Now, what is objectionable about these definitions or these descriptions? Shouldn't Christians be consistent and disciplined and principled in their adherence to the Christian faith? Yes, we should be religious. And we know that that's what religious means, right? Consistent, disciplined principles, because we'll use that word to describe people and we'll mean it as a compliment. That guy is religious about his watching The Office. That guy watches The Office religiously, we'll say, which just means consistently, deliberately, thoughtfully. He's very into it. Christians should be religious. We do have a religion. Now, historically, if you're looking at it, Christians have not been against the word religion or opposed to being described as religious. Christians were pro the use of the word religion for most of our existence. And they would use the word positively. In fact, one of my favorite books outside of Scripture is a little book by Matthew Henry written in the 17th century called The Pleasantness of a Religious Life. Right there, The Pleasantness of a Religious Life. Popular book, great book. It is really what John Piper was going for when he wrote Desiring God, which is a great book. This is shorter and better. Go to the source. Check out Matthew Henry's The Pleasantness of a Religious Life. Great book. Henry Scougal, in his classic book, The Life of God in the Soul of Man, very good work, 17th century, he says this: true religion is a union of the soul with God, a real participation of the divine nature, the very image of God drawn upon the soul, or in the apostles' phrase, it is Christ formed within us. Briefly, I do not know how the nature of religion can be more fully expressed than by calling it a divine life. Jonathan Edwards even said that he that hath doctrinal knowledge and speculation only, without affection, is never engaged in the business of religion. Religion is good. It's a good thing. It's a good idea. Now, when you're looking at the Puritans and people in that stream, when they would talk about it, really what you see is that they were talking about true religion versus false religion. So when Matthew Henry writes on the pleasantness of a religious life, he means the religious life in conformity with the one true religion. So there was really only one religion that was true, and then there were false religions. So you could be religious in a positive sense as you were following Christ. Christians understood the meaning of the word, and they embraced it. And they saw religion just fall into these two categories. You either had the truth, or you had lies, you had error, you had pagan religions, non-Christian religions, and then you had the Christian religion itself. So for especially for the Puritans, to be religious was to be Christian. It was to be devoted. It was to be spiritually minded. And we would do well to recapture the use of the word religion, to use it again, because the Bible uses that word, and it uses it in all of these ways. One of the things you can see in the scripture is that pagans can be religious, right? Not in a positive sense, as if it merits anything before God, but in Acts chapter 17, verses 22 through 24, we read, "So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, 'Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, I proclaim to you.'" So Paul says and affirms, like, I can see that you guys are religious. You're dedicated. You have your thoughts organized. You are religious people. And you mentioned this unknown God. Let me tell you about the God you don't know. So Paul flips on him and goes back. So pagans could be religious, as you're looking in Scripture. And bad religion, right? Bad religion can corrupt churches, and it can corrupt the lives of Christians. So in Colossians chapter 2, verses 22 through 23, Paul says, "If with Christ you have died to the elemental spirits of the world, why, as if you were still alive in the world, do you submit to regulations? Do not handle, do not touch, do not taste, referring to things that all perish as they are used according to human precepts and teachings. These have indeed an appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion and asceticism and severity to the body, but they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh." So what Paul is saying here is, listen, this is a self-made religion that believes that you can grow spiritually and become strong in the person you're supposed to be by denying yourself good things that God intends for you to enjoy in faith. So we can see that pagans could be religious. We can see that false religions will creep into the church and can create problems for us. But in James chapter 1, we are called to be religious. James chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. "If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world." And I like it when Scripture boils down important principles for us, right? I like that because sometimes it's a bit easier than to understand all the various individual parts when it's summarized like it is here. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father. In other words, the religion that God delights in, right? And here, we're really talking about practiced religion, right? Not religion as a set of theological beliefs. It's not a confession of faith in that way. Here, the emphasis is on the relational quality between believers and the Lord. And what does he say? Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So two things, right? And in a sense, you can see loving your neighbor and loving the Lord. You know, you can see these ideas that, in one sense, it's exemplified in visiting, that is, caring for, loving people who are largely forgotten and left without help in our culture. So you look to your neighbors who cannot pay you back. You look to the people around you who are in need, and you serve them and you love them and you help them, right? That is what the Bible calls mercy or compassion. That's pure religion. That's what godliness looks like. And it's not just external service to other people. That's a big part of it. But it's also, we're told, keeping oneself unstained from the world. So now we're talking about personal purity. Purity of thought, purity of mind, purity of action, purity of words. In other words, it really does matter how we live this life that God has given us. So to be religious in the biblical sense is to take God and his word seriously. It is to love your neighbor and to walk humbly with the Lord. It is to seek to live by the will of God as expressed in Scripture. Okay, so if the Bible talks about religion in these ways, neutrally or positively, why is there so much pushback against the word religion? Why do Christians today seem very quick to say, I'm not religious, I have a relationship with Jesus? Why? And it's largely because a lot of us have begun to equate religion with false religion, right? So instead of seeing religion as, well, it's a collection of thoughts and practices and beliefs that can either be true or false, for many of us, religion has simply become equated with false religion. It is man-made religion. It is the self-serving religion. People will equate religion with works righteousness, right? That idea that people believe that they can earn their keep or their standing before the Lord if they are somehow good enough, if they measure up. A lot of us equate religion with cold, unaffected faith and faith practices. We tend to pit the gospel of Jesus Christ against religion. And one of the main reasons we do that is because it has been popularized by some good thinkers and some good authors. Tim Keller, I think retired now, Presbyterian minister, used mightily by the Lord, and I've enjoyed much that Tim Keller has written. Tim Keller often pits the gospel against religion. But when he is doing this, he is using the word religion to mean false religion or self-righteousness. So he's really not using it in a way that would reflect the way the church has used it throughout the years. And so here are the kinds of things that Tim Keller says. And now what he says here is really good. It's actually very helpful. I think it's a misuse of the word religion. But he's saying religion says, I obey, therefore I am accepted. Right? That's what religion, and by religion he means man-centered, man-created religion. Says, if I obey the Lord, I do good, and therefore God accepts me. But the gospel, Keller would say, says this, I am accepted, therefore I obey. So here's the difference between man-made religion and the gospel or God's religion is the difference in some people think that they can obey and then God will accept them, whereas in Jesus Christ, we are already accepted through his life, death, and resurrection, and therefore, because we are accepted, we obey. Obedience comes from a different place. Keller would say things like, religion says that motivation is based on fear and insecurity, but the gospel says motivation is based on grateful joy. He would say religion says, I obey God in order to get things from God, whereas the gospel says, I obey God to get to God, to delight and resemble him. All this to say that Tim Keller and a lot of networks and a lot of good people have picked this up. This idea of simply stating that religion is bad, that religion is man-made, self-made, self-oriented, when it's really not quite that. It's certainly not biblically. All right? You can have good religion, which is the truth revealed in Scripture, or you can have bad religion. Every other conceit, every other idea that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. So just know that when you're reading a lot of modern authors, they may be using the word religion in ways that aren't reflected in Scripture or in ways that are not in keeping with 2,000 years of church history. Who cares? Like, why am I dropping a short little video on you about religion? It is because I do not want you to lose your religion. You know that phrase, losing your religion, lost my religion? Not REM, not that terrible song with the whiny guy. I'm not talking about that. And by the way, that song isn't even about religion. Just read his interviews. To lose your religion was an expression to say, like, I'm going to act in a way that it does not reflect my faith. I'm about to pop off. That's what it is. I'm going to say something. I'm really mad. I'm going to say something. I'm going to do something that I know that I shouldn't do. I'm not going to behave very Christian. You hear people say that's not very Christian of you. That's the idea. I lost my religion in that moment. That's really where that comes from. And I don't want you to lose your religion. I don't want to be a Christian who doesn't value a structured faith and obedience. When the world sees you, when the world sees a serious Christian, they will say, wow, so you're very religious. You don't have to say no. You can say, yeah, I guess you could say that. You can actually affirm what they're saying, like, well, yeah, I think there's a way in which that I am religious, maybe more religious than some or less religious than others, and then you can explain what it means. You know, they know what religion is. They can see it, and when you say that you're not religious, it seems a little fishy. Besides, it's not a religion, it's a relationship. It's not that that's untrue, but it's a little overly simplistic. This stuff matters because I don't want us to lose our religion. I also want us positively to allow the Scripture to determine what truths and words actually matter to us. And I don't want to make it overly complicated to the world. We're saying religion is bad, but we're saying that it's not a religion. That's like a cult telling you it's not a cult. We're not a cult. Well, we have one leader. He's very charismatic and very controlling, and he takes all of our money, and he has multiple wives. But it's not a cult. Bro, that's a cult. Okay? So if you say, like, it's not a religion, but we've got an organized set of doctrines and a clearly principled life of morality that's spelled out for us, and there are things you do believe and don't believe, and things you do and won't do, that's a religion. So let's not make it overly complicated for the watching world. And just don't forget, you are called to a religious life, a life that shows compassion on the needy, a life that shows an effort to walk in the ways of the Lord and not be lured away by the lies of the world. Don't be afraid. You could be religious for the Lord.